Good evening, everyone. It's fantastic to see such a terrific turnout. So I'm a climate scientist, and so I guess I'm here to share some of what our community is really concerned about when we talk about climate change. And I wanted to start firstly by saying that when it comes to climate change, Australia is actually considered the most vulnerable nation in the developed world. This figure is actually showing you that 77% of the landmass of Australia is either arid or semi-arid. That means that we are essentially a very hot and dry nation, and so we're actually very precariously balanced when it comes to water. And we all know this, as the current drought has been unfolding. And we know that Australian temperatures have increased by about 1 degree since 1910, where the Bureau of Meteorology have their records. So all of our natural variability is now playing out on the background of a warming planet. And that's a really important point, because I know that a lot of people think that we have the ups and downs in the climate system, but now we're actually seeing this influenced by an anthropogenically forced climate warming trend. And so it is now possible to run climate modelling studies that compare the likelihood of events occurring in a world with greenhouse gases and a world without, so just with natural variability. And you can compare the differences in those types of events, and we can actually see that Australia's warmest year on record, which was 2013, was actually impossible to reproduce in climate models without the presence of greenhouse gases. I can see my slide has progressed to the next slide, which is showing you the current drought conditions. And I'm sure many of you have seen the news recently and would be aware that 98% of New South Wales and 58% of Queensland is currently in drought. Drought is also affecting northern Victoria and East Gippsland, and September 2018 was the driest on record nationally, and the second driest September on record for Victoria. But sometimes when we talk about drought conditions, we fail to realise that temperature is also playing a really big role in the current drought. So Australian maximum temperatures for this year have been the second warmest on record, with anomalies of about 1.3 degrees above normal, which is only behind 2013, which was our warmest year on record. And so we're actually seeing parts of New South Wales and Queensland around 2 to 2.5 degrees above normal. And why this is important is because it actually influences the amount of evaporation, which in turn influences soil moisture, which in turn exacerbates drought. So we can't be talking about the current drought that we're experiencing right now and not be talking about climate change. And that really has been missing from some of the current discussion. And extreme heat is also being felt in our oceans. We saw back-to-back bleaching of the Great Barrier Reef in 2016 and 17, which has actually caused the dieback of 50% of shallow water corals on the Great Barrier Reef. So just in the last 2 years, we've lost 50% of the Great Barrier Reef. And so the impacts of climate change are very real and being influenced, and we're already seeing this in our region, and this is just with 1 degree of warming. And some of you might have seen, there was a report that came out just a few days ago from the US, which is suggesting that the Great Barrier Reef is, there's a 60% chance that the Great Barrier Reef is actually going to bleach again this summer. So that would actually see areas that weren't previously bleached potentially die off. So we're actually seeing large-scale ecosystem collapse right now. And this increase in extreme heat conditions is entirely consistent with the state-of-the-art climate change projections provided by the CSIRO and the Bureau of Meteorology. So typically on our business as usual scenario, we will warm by about 4 degrees by the end of the century. You can see some regional differences, but what we're talking about is seeing places like Sydney and Melbourne, our most densely populated cities, experiencing summer temperatures in excess of 50 degrees. And I think it's really important that we need to think beyond the risks of the mining sector. So often we get very stuck talking about things like coal, but we have an incredible environmental heritage that underpins our economy in the form of agriculture, tourism, fisheries, as well as our health, lifestyles, safety that we actually experience here as Australians. So I think it's really important to start to reframe the discussion around the opportunity to expand our renewable energy sector, keeping our country habitable for future generations as well. And finally, I just wanted to pull out one of the main take-home messages from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They had a special report which was looking at the impact of 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial in terms of warming. And this is a really hopeful message. It says that limiting warming to 1.5 is possible within the laws of chemistry and physics. So this is actually a scientifically achievable problem. So what we're actually missing is the political will. And sometimes we often hear that Australia only contributes around 1.3% of total global emissions, but if you add up all the countries that contribute less than 2%, we actually get to 40% of global emissions quite quickly. So it's really important that we have to play our role in terms of being a good global citizen. And just finally, I have spent a lot of time sort of piecing together past, present and future climate change. If you're interested, there's a book available for sale later this evening. Thank you.